He pulled over the wrong man on a Tuesday night in October, and he did it on camera in front of a witness with a crowbar in his hand and 14 years of arrogance guiding every decision. Officer Wade Pruitt thought he was collecting another toll on his private stretch of Route 9. He thought the man in the rental car was nobody. He thought the locked case in the cargo hold was a score. He was wrong about all three things in ways that would take everything from him. What was inside that Pelican case wasn't what Pruitt was looking for. It was something far more dangerous to a man like him. A federal investigation that had been building for 5 months, just waiting for Wade Pruitt to introduce himself to it. Stay with this story, because the moment that crowbar hit the latch, a reckoning that had been waiting 14 years finally arrived, and it did not come quietly. There are roads in this country that exist on 2 maps simultaneously. The first map is the official one, the laminated county grid on the wall of the Mercer County Sheriff's Department, with speed limit signs printed in clean black ink and jurisdiction boundaries drawn in straight, authoritative lines. On that map, Route 9 is simply a 22-mile stretch of 2-lane rural highway connecting the regional airport to the town of Beaumont, cutting through low pine forest and flat tobacco fields that hadn't been productive in a decade. Unremarkable. Governed by law. The second map only exists in the memory of people who live in Mercer County. On that map, Route 9, specifically, the 11-mile corridor between the Harlow Creek overpass and the junction at County Road 7, has a different name. Locals called it the hunting ground. The older black residents of Beaumont called it the tax road, and they said it the way you say the name of something you have learned to fear without being able to prove why to anyone who hasn't lived it. They knew to keep their speed exactly at the limit. They knew to make sure every tail light worked. They knew not to drive anything too new, too clean, or too quiet after dark. And they knew without any official confirmation that the night shift on Route 9 operated by a different set of rules than the ones in the county code. The author of those different rules was Officer Wade Pruitt. He was 39 years old and had been with the Mercer County Sheriff's Department for 14 years, which in a county this size meant he had outlasted 3 sheriffs, 2 department reorganizations, and more civilian complaints than anyone in the building's administration had made a genuine effort to count. Most of Pruitt's targets never filed anything at all. They drove home from the gravel shoulder with shaking hands and told their families to be careful out there, and the warning passed between households like a weather report the official channels refused to acknowledge. Pruitt was a broad man, not tall, just dense and wide, in the way of someone who had spent his whole life occupying spaces too small for his sense of himself. He had a head that seemed designed for a larger body, and a pair of flat creek water eyes that were always measuring, always calculating the distance between what he wanted and what he believed he could take. He ruled his patch of Route 9, the way a medieval lord ruled a road, not through legitimate authority, but through repetition, and the simple fact that if you are the only power within 10 miles in any direction, you become by default the law. In the past 3 years alone, he had accumulated 9 civilian complaints. Not one had generated a formal investigation. The reason had a name and a rank, and Lieutenant Carson Briggs ran the department's internal oversight division from a corner office on the 2nd floor of the Beaumont substation. He was a lean, careful man of 52, with the permanently measured expression of someone who had spent a career managing the distance between what happened and what the paperwork said happened. He and Pruitt had been hunting white-tailed deer together every November for 11 years. The arrangement they maintained in their professional capacity was not complicated. Pruitt did the work on the road, Briggs ensured the work disappeared from the record, and neither man had ever been asked by anyone with real authority to explain themselves. Riding with Pruitt on this particular Tuesday night was Deputy Marcus Webb, 24 years old, 8 months out of the academy, already nursing the specific gastric anxiety that develops in a young person who spends 40 hours a week watching something they know is wrong and has not yet found the courage to say so out loud. Webb had been trained in de-escalation constitutional law and community-based policing philosophy. 8 months of riding with Wade Pruitt had not erased any of that training. It had simply buried it under layers of exhaustion and small daily surrenders that were accumulating in his conscience, the way sediment accumulates at the bottom of a still pond. Tonight, Pruitt was parked in his usual position, a gravel pull-off behind the mileage marker at mile 44, screened from the southbound lanes by a collapsed billboard advertising a personal injury attorney whose office had closed in 2019. He had a thermos of black coffee on the console, country music turned low, and the patient attention of a man waiting for something he has seen many times before. Webb sat in the passenger seat and watched the tree line and said nothing. 300 miles north and 4 hours earlier, Marcus Ellison had been sitting in a window seat on a regional commuter flight, watching the last of the evening light dissolve over the Carolina Piedmont, and thinking about his brother. He did this sometimes when he was flying into a new assignment. He would watch the landscape change color in the fading light, and he would think about Andre. Not Andre now at 41, who ran a landscaping business in Northern Virginia and coached youth basketball on Saturdays, but Andre at 27, which is how old he had been when a highway patrol officer in a county not unlike Mercer County pulled him over on a dark rural road. The officer had charged Andre with possession of a controlled substance that was never found, resisting arrest without evidence of resistance, disorderly conduct, which in that county's judicial vocabulary meant the officer was angry when he left. Andre had spent 11 months fighting those charges. $18,000 in legal fees he didn't have. The project manager position he'd held for 2 years gone because the company couldn't keep an employee with pending criminal charges. Complete acquittal in the end, not a plea, a jury that came back in under 3 hours. But acquittal after 11 months is not the same thing as justice at the beginning. The 11 months were still spent. The career was still gone. The money was still gone. And the particular way Andre used to walk into a room with a lightness that Marcus had always privately loved was still gone. Acquittal gave you your name back. It did not give you back everything you had spent defending it. Marcus had been 26 years old when that happened. He was already 2 years into his career with the Bureau working financial crimes in the Washington field office. What happened to Andre didn't make him angry in the way that produces heat. It made him angry in the way that produces patience. He had spent the 17 years since learning the law the way a surgeon learns anatomy, not to admire it from a distance, but to know precisely where to cut and what happens when you do. He was very good at his job. He was quiet about it, which in the Civil Rights Division was the primary qualification. The Mercer County file had been on his desk for 5 months. 23 complaint letters, all naming Pruitt, all describing variations of the same encounter: pretextual stop, manufactured probable cause, aggressive search, unlawful detention. Use of force statistics showing black motorists on Route 9 subjected to physical contact at a rate 340% above the state average. 2 anonymous letters, one from a paralegal, one he suspected came from a courthouse clerk, describing how Briggs's office ensured that internal complaints against Pruitt never reached formal review. What he didn't have was evidence that could survive a federal courtroom. Complaint letters are testimony. Statistics are context. What he needed was documentation, a clean recorded event that couldn't be explained away by a union attorney with an afternoon of preparation. So Marcus Ellison had done what the division occasionally did when the institutional protection around a subject was dense enough and the complaint pattern was compelling enough. He had gone to introduce himself to the problem personally. The Pelican case in the cargo hold of his rented Dodge Durango charcoal, dark Virginia plates, late model, contained his service weapon, a government-issued encrypted communications laptop, bearing a tamper-evident DOJ seal, and a secondary credentials folio with his gold and blue FBI shield. The entire case was secured by a biometric latch requiring his thumbprint and a 6-digit code. He had not packed anything careless. Everything in that rental car, including Marcus himself, was evidence in a case that hadn't formally started yet. He found a gospel station at mile marker 61 and left it on low, not because he was devotional tonight, but because the low static of it was companionable on a dark road when you are tired and still a long way from sleep. The rain had started 10 miles out, thin, cold October rain that beaded on the windshield and turned distant headlights into smears of white. He set the wipers to intermittent. He set his speed at 58 miles per hour in a 55 zone. He placed both hands on the wheel. He had read the intelligence brief on Route 9 twice before leaving Washington. He knew about the Harlow Creek overpass. He knew about the collapsed billboard. He knew the specific quality of danger this road had carried for the people who drove it. In the cargo hold, the Pelican case sat locked and waiting, containing everything Pruitt was about to hand over to it. Pruitt saw the Durango at mile marker 47, doing exactly 58 in a 55. Virginia plates, late model, black male driver alone after midnight. The profiling reflex fired before conscious thought could mediate it, a neural pathway worn so deep by 14 years of repetition that it no longer required the friction of reason. He reached for the light bar toggle. "What's the cause?" Wade Webb asked. Carefully, the voice of a young man who has learned to phrase challenges as questions. Drifted toward the fog line at the bridge. Pruitt said, not taking his eyes off the Durango's taillights. "You saw it." Webb had been watching the tree line. The Durango had not drifted anywhere. "Sure," Webb said and turned to look out his window so Pruitt wouldn't see his face. The light bar strobed to life. The Durango's right turn signal came on within 3 seconds, immediate, clean, unhurried. The vehicle moved to the shoulder in a single lane change, rolled to a smooth stop on the gravel near the Harlow Creek overpass and went still. No cameras at the overpass. Pruitt had mapped every camera on his stretch years ago. Inside the Durango, Marcus read the location in one glance and understood exactly where he was. He recognized the Harlow Creek overpass from the intelligence brief. He took one slow breath, turned off the ignition, rolled down all 4 windows. Despite the cold rain, switched on the interior dome light and placed both hands flat on the top of the steering wheel, fingers spread wide. He did not reach for his credentials. He made a deliberate professional decision, let it run. Every second of what happened next would be documented by the cruiser's dash cam. Whatever Pruitt did in the next 30 minutes, he would do it on tape with a federal agent as the subject and the departmental recording equipment doing the work of preservation. The 5-month case was about to build itself in real time. Marcus's only job was to comply, document, and endure. He watched Pruitt's shadow grow in the driver's side mirror as the officer approached. He did not know, sitting there with the rain coming through the open windows and the gospel station still playing low on the stereo, that in less than 2 hours, he would watch this man destroy his own career with a crowbar in a room full of cameras. He did not need to know. He simply needed to be present for what came next, and he was. The shadow reached his door. Pruitt walked with his right hand resting on the butt of his service weapon and a 1,000-lumen tactical flashlight in his left, and the moment he reached the driver's window, he aimed the beam directly at Marcus's eyes. Not at the interior, not at the back seat, at the face. A practiced move, precise through repetition. It disoriented the driver. It slowed reaction time, and it established in the first 2 seconds of contact who held the power in the next several minutes. Marcus squinted against the beam and kept his hands on the wheel. Pruitt let the silence run for 5 full seconds. Then license registration and proof of insurance. No greeting. No explanation for the stop. No professional courtesy of any kind. The tone of a man who has given this command so many times that the social components of language, the please, the good evening, the reason have been worn completely away. Good evening, officer. Marcus's voice was steady and unhurried, calibrated to reach the cruiser's dashcam microphone 40 feet behind him. My wallet's in my right rear pocket. Rental agreements in the glove box. I'll reach for them now slowly. Pruitt's jaw tightened. He didn't like this. The calm was wrong. The phrasing was wrong. Civilians didn't announce their movements like that unless they knew the protocol. And people who knew the protocol were people who had thought about what they'd do when this moment came. And people who'd thought about it were people who expected to be able to use what they recorded against you. Just hand them over, he said. No sudden moves. Marcus produced his civilian driver's license and the rental agreement. Pruitt snatched them, held the light on the plastic card. Marcus Ellison. Virginia plates on a Carolina rental. Long way from home. He paused with the deliberate theatricality of a man who performs suspicion for an audience he imagines watching. What brings you through Mercer County at this hour? Business, Marcus said. Officer, may I ask the reason for the stop? Pruitt scoffed the specific sound of a man offended by a question's existence. You were drifting toward the fog line, and your window tint looks illegal. This is a commercial rental vehicle. Marcus said, his tone neutral and level. The tint is factory standard compliant with federal regulation 49 CFR Part 571. I've maintained my lane for the past several miles. If you have a calibrated reading showing a violation, I'd be glad to see it. The flush started at Pruitt's collar and moved upward. In 14 years, very few people had responded to his accusations with citations. Specific citations. The kind that came from knowing the regulation number by memory. Are you calling me a liar? His voice dropped an octave, manufactured menace effective through repetition. I'm stating facts on the record, Marcus said quietly. His dark eyes found Pruitt's through the flashlight glare and held them. If a citation is appropriate, I'll accept it. Otherwise, I'd like to continue to my hotel. What happened in Pruitt's mind in the next 3 seconds was not complicated. It was the arithmetic of a man whose authority had been questioned in front of a subordinate, whose ego had no architecture to absorb that challenge without converting it immediately into force. He stepped back from the window, unsnapped the retention strap on his holster, not drawing, just making the sound audible, the soft leather pop that in 14 years had reliably changed the temperature of any interaction, and said the words he had said hundreds of times on the shoulder of Route 9. Step out of the vehicle. Officer. Marcus kept his hands visible, his voice careful and clear. I'm not a threat. I have no criminal history, and I'm unarmed. Under Terry versus Ohio, a lawful exit order requires reasonable, articulable suspicion of a crime. I'm asking you to state what crime you believe has occurred. Pruitt yanked the door handle. You're resisting a lawful order. The volume was performance. The register of a man establishing a narrative for the dashcam, creating a verbal record of resistance where none existed. He reached into the cab and grabbed Marcus by the bicep. Webb stepped forward half a step from the rear quarter panel. Wade, shut it, Webb. Pruitt didn't turn his head, then quieter with the specific softness of a threat that doesn't need volume. You write up clean tonight, or you write up nothing. Pick one. Webb went still. He looked at his boots. He felt something shift permanently in his chest, some load-bearing wall of himself that he hadn't known he was depending on until he felt it begin to give. Marcus did not fight the grab. He had made this calculation before the cruiser's lights ever appeared in his mirror. Physical resistance on a dark rural highway alone against an armed officer with a documented pattern of escalation was not a calculation with outcomes he could survive. His body complied. His mind was elsewhere in the clinical precise mode that made him one of the better investigators in the division, the mode in which everything happening to him became raw material rather than personal injury. But it cost him something to be that cold. Somewhere beneath the professional calculation, behind the careful inventory of Fourth Amendment violations he was assembling, was a sound he did not want in his head tonight. The sound of his brother's voice on the phone 11 months into the worst year of Andre's life, saying, "They didn't even look at me, Marcus. They just decided." He locked that sound away behind the part of himself that was building this case, and he kept his hands visible, and he spoke loudly and clearly for the dashcam. "I'm stepping out. I'm complying under physical compulsion. I do not consent to this." Pruitt spun him the moment both feet hit the gravel. Marcus's chest hit the exterior of the Durango with a force that drove the breath out of him, cold, wet metal. The impact sharp and blooming, the kind of pain that announces itself quietly now and arrives fully later. Pruitt kicked his legs apart and forced him into a wide, uncomfortable stance. Rain ran down the back of Marcus's neck and soaked through his shirt collar. His cheek pressed against the cold metal of the SUV door. "Hands behind your back," Pruitt commanded, unhooking his handcuffs. "You are making a serious professional error," Marcus said, steady, despite the rain and the ache spreading across his chest. "I strongly recommend you contact your watch commander before taking this any further." "I am the authority on this traffic stop," Pruitt said, and ratcheted the first cuff around Marcus's left wrist, then the right. Then he squeezed the ratchet an extra 2 clicks past standard 2 clicks, past any legitimate safety purpose. The kind of tightness that communicates something specific about how the person being restrained is regarded by the person doing the restraining. The steel bit into the thin skin over Marcus's wrist bones. The circulation began to compress immediately. He felt the throb starting dull. Now it would sharpen later, and he registered it the same way he registered everything tonight. Data, he thought. All of this is data. What's the charge, he asked. Resisting. Failure to comply. Disorderly conduct. Pruitt was already moving toward the Durango, reaching for the door handle. And we'll see what the car produces. He was not methodical. He was purposeful in the way of someone looking for something specific and willing to make a mess in the process. The suitcase came out of the cargo area, first unzipped on the wet gravel contents, distributed across the shoulder, without consideration for what the rain was doing to them. Dress shirt, change of slacks. Toiletry bag, emptied. Nothing. The glove box, rental documents, a tire pressure gauge. 2 paper maps included by the agency. The center console, a phone charging cable, a coffee shop receipt, sugar-free gum. Nothing. In the cargo area, past the suitcase wreckage, the Pelican case. Matte black heavy-duty polymer, no exterior markings. Approximately the size of a large carry-on. The latch was a biometric pad, black glass inert, without the registered thumbprint. No keyhole. No visible override. Pruitt lifted it out and set it on the gravel like a found prize. He carried it to the cruiser. Opened the rear door where Marcus sat cuffed, watching through the rain-streaked window. "What's in this?" Ellison Pruitt said, tapping the hard shell. "Walk me through it." "That is a secured government container," Marcus said through the partition. "You don't have a warrant. You don't have valid probable cause for the stop that produced the detention that produced access to my vehicle. Tampering with that case is a federal felony. I'm telling you clearly on camera, do not touch it." Pruitt looked at him for a moment, the look of a man deciding whether a warning is credible. Then he made the decision he always made when warnings came from people he decided were beneath him. He decided it wasn't. Sovereign citizen garbage. He told Webb, who was standing near the driver's door with the expression of someone watching a slow-motion collision. He put the Pelican case in the trunk alongside Marcus's suitcase and slammed the lid. "Let's take him in." 22 minutes to the Mercer County Sheriff's substation. Pruitt spent the drive performing talking at the intercom panel with the volume of a man who wants everything recorded. He called Marcus a wannabe lawyer. He described the Pelican case as probably full of whatever this guy's been moving. He promised a holding cell until Monday, since a bail judge wouldn't be available until then. He laughed at his own observations. Marcus sat in the back of the cruiser and said nothing. He watched the pine trees move past the rain-streaked window. The plastic seat was cold. The dome light was dim. His wrists ached with a steady, deepening pressure from the over-tightened cuffs. Not the sharp pain of something broken, but the dull, insistent throb of something that has been wrong long enough to start demanding acknowledgement. He let it exist. He cataloged it, added it to the list. Excessive restraint force. That was the legal category. He filed it there and kept building. He thought about the 5 months of complaint letters on his desk in Washington. He thought about the 23 people who had written those letters, who had gone through the process, who had been told by the apparatus that was supposed to protect them that they were wrong. He thought about the paralegal who had sent an anonymous note describing how Briggs's office worked, who had taken the risk of sending it without any assurance that anyone with power would ever read it. He was reading it right now, in a sense. He was the answer to it, if he did this correctly. He thought about Andre briefly, and then locked the thought away. Webb glanced in the rearview mirror 3 times during the drive. The 3rd time, Marcus met his eyes for 2 seconds. Webb held the contact a fraction longer than he'd intended, long enough for something to pass between them that wasn't a conversation, but was adjacent to one. The specific private communication of a young person who knows they are in the wrong place, and a man who can see it on their face. Then Webb looked away. They pulled into the Sallyport. The heavy steel security gate rattled closed behind them. The fluorescent overheads flickered on. The evening's machinery was in place. Desk Sergeant Donna Holt had been with the department for 20 years and could read a person's situation in the first 3 seconds of their arrival at the booking counter. Not always correctly, she would be the first to say so, but with a reliability that had made her over time an institutional conscience, in a building that was not designed to accommodate one. She was 52, gray-haired, and she set down her crossword puzzle when Pruitt marched Marcus Ellison through the interior door from the Sallyport. She looked at the man in cuffs. Despite being rain-damp and disheveled, his posture carried a quality of stillness she had encountered exactly twice in 20 years. Both times, it turned out, in people with considerably more authority than the room assumed. Pruitt made his announcement at full volume. Traffic stop turned uncooperative, resisting arrest, disorderly conduct, suspected trafficking, locked contraband container. He said it like a fisherman announcing a catch. Name, Holt asked, reaching for the intake log. Marcus Ellison, he said quietly. Sergeant, I'm requesting my phone call. My continued detention is unlawful, and the vehicle search conducted on Route 9 was performed without warrant or valid probable cause. Yeah, Pruitt said, already emptying the property bag onto the counter, wallet, phone, hotel keycard. Process him. Cell 2. I'm going to find out what's in that briefcase. He lifted the Pelican case onto the counter and picked it up. Tommy! Holt's voice carried the particular tone of a person who has learned to push as far as she can and no further. You can't open that without a warrant. DA'll throw anything out. Probable cause. Pruitt said, already moving. I smelled something in the vehicle. He was heading toward the evidence processing room at the end of the hallway. Back in 10. The door closed. Holt looked at the counter. She looked at Marcus. She reached for his wallet. She flipped it open to photograph the driver's license for the intake log, and behind the civilian license was a second card. The shield was gold and blue enamel heavy, and detailed in a way that separated it from any novelty or costume piece at a glance. The eagle at the top was 3-dimensional. The letters below it deeply set a chip embedded in the backing for secure federal building access. Beside it, in the adjacent window of the wallet, was an identification card with a photograph of the man standing at her counter. The same close-cropped hair, the same steady, unreadable eyes. And beneath the photograph, the seal of the Department of Justice, and the words, Supervisory Special Agent, Civil Rights Division, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Donna Holt's hands began to tremble. She looked up from the wallet. Marcus was watching her with the patience of a man who has been waiting for exactly this moment. "The case officer Pruitt just took down that hallway," Marcus said, his voice dropping low and even. "Contains a government-issued sidearm and an encrypted DOJ communications terminal. The case is biometrically locked. If he forces it, he destroys federal property and tampers with secured government communications equipment. Both are federal felonies. He is doing this in a room that I assume has security camera coverage." Holt was already reaching for the radio. "Pruitt." Her voice scaled upward. "Tommy, stop. Do not touch that case. Answer me. Pruitt, stop what you're doing right now and come back to booking." Static. A crackle. Nothing. "Tommy, I need you to—" The radio answered her with silence. She stared at the DOJ shield in the open wallet. She stared at Marcus. She said in a voice that had lost most of its official composure, "Your FBI." "Civil Rights Division," Marcus confirmed softly. "Washington Field Office. I arrived in Mercer County approximately 4 hours ago." A pause. "Sergeant, take these cuffs off. Whatever is happening in that evidence room is already in motion. Don't let it get any worse than it already is." Donna Holt set the radio down, came around the counter, and reached for her keys. The evidence processing room smelled of industrial cleaner and accumulated procedure. Cinder block walls, metal shelving, a single overhead fluorescent buzzing at a frequency just below the threshold of conscious annoyance. Pruitt had the Pelican case on the central processing table and a 24-inch steel crowbar wedged under its reinforced latch, putting his full 210-pound frame into the leverage. He was sweating through his uniform shirt. The sweat was not from exertion. The room was cool. He was sweating because some buried quiet part of him, the part that hadn't been entirely swallowed by 14 years of impunity, was trying to get his attention, trying to tell him something. The louder, more practiced part of his brain was drowning out. He wasn't listening. He was listening to the narrative he'd already written: the biometric lock, the out-of-state plates, the man who knew too much law. This was a trafficker who'd found a way to make product look official. The locked case was the tell. He was about to open it and find something that retroactively justified everything, and by tomorrow morning, he'd be the deputy who cracked a sophisticated interstate operation, and the complaint from the man in cell 2 would dissolve. He put his weight into the bar. The reinforced latch held for 3 seconds. Then it gave a violent metallic shriek that sent vibration through the table and up his arms, and the lid buckled and released with a pressurized hiss, a small, precise sound, like something exhaling that had been held too long. The crowbar clattered to the floor. Pruitt reached out and flipped the lid back. His smile lasted half a second. High-density black foam, precision cut. 3 items. Left. Recess, a matte black. Sig Sauer M11. A1 pistol, secured beside 3 loaded magazines, arranged in descending order, military-grade foam, fitted perfectly around each one. Center recess. A ruggedized Panasonic Toughbook laptop, matte gray, a tamper-evident seal across the hinge. Deeply engraved into the casing, unmistakable from 3 feet away, United States Department of Justice. Right. Recess. A secondary leather credentials folio fallen face up when the lid jerked back. Lying open in the foam, catching the fluorescent light, was a gold shield. Heavy. Detailed. The eagle spread wide the letters below it, clear and final. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Beside it, the identification card, the photograph, the name, Supervisory Special Agent. Pruitt stepped backward. His shoulder hit the metal shelving hard enough to rattle the evidence bags on the upper rack. His right hand opened, and the crowbar hit the concrete floor with a sound that seemed, in the sudden absolute silence, enormously loud. He looked at the broken latch. He looked at the DOJ seal on the laptop. He looked at the badge and the foam face-up perfectly lit going nowhere. "No," he whispered. Just breath shaped like a word. He looked at the crowbar on the floor. He looked at the security camera in the upper corner of the room, its small red record light steady and unblinking, having watched every second of what he just did. No, no, no. The evidence room door burst open. Donna Holt stood in the doorway, face the color of wet concrete. Behind her, Webb gripped the doorframe with both hands, his knuckles gone white. Both of them took in the tableau in silence. Pruitt's gray face, the broken case on the table, the DOJ seal on the laptop, the crowbar on the floor. Tommy. Holt's voice was barely there. Tell me you didn't force it. Pruitt's mouth opened and closed. The dash cam recorded you pulling it from his vehicle, she said, stepping into the room. The Sallyport camera recorded you bringing it in. The hallway camera recorded you going to maintenance and coming back with that. She pointed at the crowbar. And this camera just recorded everything that happened in here. She stared at him. You didn't just violate department policy, Wade. You committed a federal felony, on camera, in your own building. We can fix this, Pruitt said. His voice had the quality of something already broken trying to hold its shape. We say the latch was defective. We say it popped open in... I'm not doing that, Holt said. I am not going down with you. She turned and walked out. Her footsteps were audible all the way down the hall. Webb had not moved from the doorframe. He stood there while Pruitt tried to push the broken lid of the Pelican case closed, while Pruitt attempted to reconstruct a story in real time. Defective latch opened in transit. Nobody could have known. And when Pruitt turned and said, You saw the fog line, Webb. You were in that car. 2 officers against 1 civilian. That's a credibility question. That's not an open and shut. No, Webb said. 1 word. Quiet as anything. But the quietest words are sometimes the most load-bearing. Pruitt stared at him. I didn't see him cross any line, Webb said. He wasn't looking at his boots anymore. He was looking at Pruitt, and his face was still pale and still frightened. But it was also resolute in the specific way of a person who has found the thing they are not willing to cross. He was doing 58 in a 55. He didn't drift anywhere. You lied on the dash cam. A pause. I'm not saying otherwise under oath. Pruitt said nothing. Webb stepped back from the doorframe and went to find somewhere to sit. Pruitt stood in the evidence room with the broken case and the DOJ seal and the crowbar and the camera's steady red light, and he reached for his personal cell phone, and he called the one person who had always been able to make things go away. Carson Briggs answered on the 3rd ring. He had seen the caller ID and taken the time to decide. Pruitt gave him a condensed, passive voice version of events. A developing situation on a Route 9 stop. Driver with federal credentials. A case that had incidentally opened during processing. He used the grammar of distance and ambiguity, the grammar Briggs himself had taught him through years of watching the older man write reports. Briggs listened without speaking. When Pruitt finished, there was a silence of 4 full seconds. In 14 years, Briggs had never paused that long before responding. The pause carried its own information. Civil Rights Division, Briggs said finally. His voice was completely flat. Washington Field Office. All the familiar warmth, the hunting trip ease, the long-term partnership comfort was gone from it entirely, replaced by the tone of a man rapidly calculating his own exposure. Yeah, Pruitt said, and you forced the case. The latch was. Wade. A quiet, precise cut. I'm going to tell you something clearly, and I need you to hear it. I cannot come in. I cannot call anyone on your behalf. I cannot contact the union, the DA, or a judge in my capacity as internal oversight, because the moment I do, I insert myself into a federal civil rights investigation as a material party. A pause that felt geological in length. I've been signing dismissal letters for 14 years. If the division has been building a file on Mercer County, my name is in it. If I touch this, I hand them a conspiracy charge. Rick, listen to me. You're on your own tonight. The line went dead. Pruitt sat in the break room under fluorescent lights, with the silent phone in his hand, and the specific gravitational terror of a man who has spent 14 years believing himself invulnerable settled into his chest like concrete curing. Not the adrenaline panic of the traffic stop, not even the shock fear of the evidence room. Something heavier. The recognition that the belief, the fundamental article of faith that he was protected, that his network held, that someone would always answer on the third ring, had always been provisional. Had always been contingent on the problem being small enough for the network to absorb. This problem was not small enough. Holt had the cuffs off Marcus's wrists before she reached the booking desk. She unlocked them, set them on the counter, and stepped back. Marcus rubbed his wrists. The marks were deep, 2 livid red bands. The skin compressed and discolored, the kind of marks that take days to fully fade, and that a forensic photographer would find entirely sufficient. He pressed his thumb into the compression point on his left wrist and felt the circulation returning slowly. He noted it. He added it to the record he'd been building in his head since the moment Pruitt's headlights appeared in his mirror. "Thank you, Sergeant," he said. Holt said nothing. She was looking at the DOJ shield on the counter, with the expression of a person standing at the edge of a very deep decision, trying to find the ground. "Desk phone," Marcus said. She pushed it toward him. He dialed from memory. The line connected on the first ring, which meant someone was already awake, which meant the division's monitoring systems had already flagged something, his location perhaps, or the duration of the stop, or the simple fact that he had gone dark for 90 minutes in a jurisdiction that was actively under pre-investigation review. "It's Marcus," he said. "I'm at the Mercer County Sheriff's substation in Beaumont. I was detained on Route 9 approximately 90 minutes ago. Illegal stop. No articulable suspicion, fabricated probable cause, stated on the departmental dashcam. Physical extraction. Unconsented. Vehicle search. Unlawful seizure of the Pelican case. The arresting officer has just forced the case using a crowbar. The sidearm and the tough book are inside." He listened for several seconds. "Understood. 18 minutes. He hung up. He turned around. Holt was behind the counter, typing on her terminal, with the focused precision of a person who has decided which side of something they want to be on. Webb had come back down the hallway from the direction of the break room and was sitting in a chair near the interior door, both hands on his knees, looking at the floor. From somewhere in the building, barely audible through cinder block, came the distant sound of Pruitt in the break room, or rather, the silence of Pruitt in the break room, which was louder in a way. Marcus looked at the security camera in the upper right corner of the booking area, its red record light steady. He looked at Pruitt's silver Mercer County Sheriff's star, which had fallen from the property bag during processing, and was sitting on the counter beside his wallet, and he experienced the specific contained satisfaction of a man who has watched a machine he designed begin to run. "Sergeant Holt," he said, effective immediately. "No personnel enter or leave this building. Lock down all dashcam footage from Officer Pruitt's cruiser, all body cam footage from both officers, and every security feed in this station, including the evidence processing room. Flag them as federal evidence. Don't allow anyone to alter, delete, or export them without my authorization." "Yes, sir," Holt said, and she said it with genuine relief. The relief of a person who has been waiting for someone to give her a clear, legitimate instruction. Marcus walked to the bench along the near wall, sat down, and waited. He rubbed his wrists once slowly, and then placed his hands on his knees, and was still. 17 minutes later, the parking lot lights of the Mercer County substation began to reflect a new kind of illumination. They came without sirens. That was the first thing Pruitt noticed when he walked back into the booking area. The parking lot visible through the frosted glass panel beside the front door had changed color. The dead gray of an empty late-night lot was alive with the cold, steady white of high-beam headlights belonging to large vehicles that had positioned themselves in a specific pattern, blocking every exit, angled for documentation rather than pursuit. 5 black Chevrolet Suburbans. 2 marked state police cruisers, parked with the precision of people who have done this before and know exactly where each unit needs to be. The front doors opened 12 seconds later. The agents moved the way federal agents move when they have already made every decision with a controlled, purposeful efficiency that filled the space differently than local law enforcement does, that changed the pressure of the room the moment they entered it. A dozen of them, tactical vests. No drawn weapons. Drawn weapons were for unknowns, and this situation had no unknowns. They secured exits positioned at the evidence room hallway, established coverage of the booking area, and did all of it in under 30 seconds without any unnecessary words. Leading them was a woman of 54 with silver locks pulled back and the kind of posture that has nothing to do with effort. It comes from 25 years of walking into rooms and expecting them to adjust to your presence, rather than the reverse. Special Agent in Charge. Diane Okafor had been with the Bureau since the year Pruitt joined the department, and in that time, she had overseen 4 federal consent decrees, prosecuted 11 civil rights cases, and developed a reputation within the division for a quality most accurately described as patience with teeth. She walked past the booking counter, past Holt, past Webb, and went directly to Marcus. She looked at his wrists. She looked at his face. She said one word: status. He forced the case. Marcus said. The temperature in the room dropped. Behind Okafor, filling the doorway, in a rain jacket thrown over a dress shirt, was Mercer County Sheriff Gerald Hatch, pulled from a dinner party 30-minute drive to process the magnitude of what he was walking into, arriving to find that every version of events he'd constructed in the car was already obsolete. He was pale. His hands were not entirely steady. 2 state troopers peeled off from the federal team and moved to Pruitt's position without being directed, flanking him with the matter-of-fact efficiency of people performing a familiar procedure on a subject who has run out of options. Hatch made it 40 seconds into his damage control speech before Okafor stopped him. She stopped him with a look. The look of a person who is not angry, so much as completely unmoved by the performance. And then she said 3 things. She said that Mercer County's use of force rate against black motorists on Route 9 was 340% above the state average, and that this figure had held consistent for 7 years. She said that the Civil Rights Division had received 23 complaints naming Wade Pruitt by name in the preceding 18 months. She said that Lieutenant Carson Briggs's Internal Oversight Office had signed dismissal letters for each of those 23 complaints without generating a single formal review. Hatch stopped speaking in the middle of his own sentence. What crossed his face was not the shock of new information. It was the specific expression of a man hearing something he had, on some level, always known existed and had simply chosen never to examine directly. The face of someone whose willful distance from the truth was ending against his will. This investigation, Okafor said, did not begin tonight. Tonight is the documentation phase. She turned to Pruitt. She listed every charge in sequence at the measured pace of someone reading from a mental document she had been composing for months. Illegal traffic stop. No articulable suspicion. Fabricated probable cause recorded on departmental dashcam. Illegal physical extraction. Unlawful search and seizure. Illegal seizure of a locked federal container. Willful destruction of federal government property. Title 18, Section 1361. Civil rights deprivation under color of law. Title 18, Section 242. She did not raise her voice. She did not rush. She looked at Pruitt throughout. Pruitt said, "I want my union rep." Hatch, who had taken a small, definitive half-step backward during Okafor's recitation, said quietly, "The union's been notified, Wade. They declined to send representation tonight." Pruitt looked at Webb. Webb was sitting against the far wall, two federal agents positioned nearby. He looked up when Pruitt's eyes found him. Pruitt said it one last time. "Tell them. Tell them you saw him cross the fog line. Tell them what I told you." And Webb looked at him for a long moment and shook his head. Slowly, without drama. The small private movement of a person who has finally located the thing they are not willing to do and is doing it and will not stop. Okafor nodded at one of the agents near the booking desk. The agent pulled up a feed on the desk monitor. No setup, no announcement, just the click of a keyboard and the screen coming to life. It was the dash cam footage from Pruitt's cruiser. Time-stamped. Clear. The audio came first, a half-second before the picture stabilized. Pruitt's voice, recorded on his own department's equipment at the moment he fabricated the stop, drifted toward the fog line at the bridge. "You saw it right, rookie." Then Webb's voice, barely audible. "Sure." The picture showed the gravel shoulder, the Durango properly parked. Marcus's hands on the wheel, dome light on all four windows down in the rain. Then Pruitt's flashlight aimed at his face. Then the documents being handed over. Then unmistakable in Pruitt's own voice on Pruitt's own dash cam. "Are you calling me a liar, boy?" The recording played the moment of physical extraction. The door yanked open. Marcus's feet on the gravel, his voice loud and deliberate. "I'm stepping out. I'm complying under physical compulsion. I do not consent to this." And then Pruitt's hands on his back, the slam against the vehicle, the cuffs. Then the drive. Pruitt's voice on the intercom, magic briefcase full of nothing. Laughter. The promise of a holding cell until Monday. Okafor let it run for 45 seconds. Then she stopped it. The silence in the booking room was of a particular kind. The silence that follows the playing of evidence that requires no interpretation, that explains itself completely, that leaves no rhetorical space for an alternative version of events. Pruitt was staring at the monitor. His own face was frozen on the screen at the moment of the fabricated accusation, flushed, certain, lit by his own flashlight's reflected glare. "Your voice," Okafor said. "Your dash cam. Your department's recording equipment." She paused. "Any questions about what you said to this man, or when, or in front of whom?" Pruitt said nothing. He was looking at the screen with the expression of a man watching a door close that he did not know was open until it was already shut. Okafor stepped aside. Marcus walked across the booking room. He moved without urgency, without theater. He stopped 2 feet from Pruitt. The marks from the cuffs were still visible on his wrists. His shirt was still rain-damp at the collar. He looked at the man who had kicked his legs apart on a wet gravel shoulder 3 hours ago and had been so certain he was looking at nobody that he had not bothered to look carefully at all. "I want to tell you what tonight actually was," Marcus said. His voice was quiet enough that it required stillness in the room to hear. 5 months ago, my office opened a pre-investigation file on Mercer County. We had 23 complaint letters. We had the Route 9 use of force data. We had 2 anonymous sources describing how Lieutenant Briggs's office had buried every complaint you generated. What we didn't have was a documented camera-confirmed event that a federal grand jury could hold in their hands. He paused. "So, I came to build one." The room was completely still. "I rented this specific Durango because it matches the vehicle profile that appears most frequently in your complaint files. I drove Route 9 because that is the road where you hunt. I set my speed at 58 miles per hour because that is what your targets do. They drive carefully. They follow the rules, and you pull them over anyway. I did not show you my credentials on that shoulder because I needed to see what you do when you believe no one important is watching." He let the silence hold for 3 full seconds. "Within 2 hours of landing in Mercer County, you fabricated probable cause on your own dash cam, physically extracted me from a vehicle without a lawful order, searched that vehicle without warrant, seized a locked federal container, transported it to your own evidence room, and destroyed it with a crowbar, also on your own cameras." He stopped. His voice remained level, but it carried something now that had not been in it before. Something that was not anger and not triumph, but was the weight of 5 months of work and 17 years of waiting arriving at the same moment. You didn't just conduct an illegal traffic stop tonight, Officer Pruitt. You arrested your own investigation. You handed me every charge in this indictment in 90 minutes on government equipment in front of a witness. And you did it because you looked at a man sitting quietly in a rental car and decided he was nobody. The words sat in the air of the booking room. "I'm not interested in your explanation," Marcus said. "I'm interested in your badge." Okafor signaled. The 2 state troopers moved with practiced efficiency. Pruitt's service weapon was drawn from the duty belt magazine, dropped chamber cleared, and set on the booking counter. The spare magazines followed. The OC spray, the radio. Each item placed on the laminate surface with a small definitive sound. Finally, the silver Mercer County Sheriff's star. One of the troopers unpinned it carefully from Pruitt's chest. Not rough, not theatrical, simply deliberate, and set it beside the weapon. The sound it made on the counter was very small. The handcuffs came out. The same model, the same steel gray finish, the same ratchet mechanism. They were placed around Pruitt's wrists and secured, and the ratchet clicked 2 notches past standard. Whether by design or coincidence, the outcome was the same. Pruitt winced. He looked at his wrists. Marcus observed this and said nothing. They walked Pruitt through the booking room and into the sally port. The same door, the same path, the same overhead lights as an hour before, when he had walked a cuffed man through here feeling like a king of his particular road. The security gate opened. The federal SUV sat in the lot headlights, still running exhaust pale in the October air. Pruitt's head was guided down as he was placed in the back of the nearest vehicle. The door closed. The lot was briefly comprehensively lit. Webb stood in the doorway of the sally port and watched until the SUV disappeared around the corner of the building. Then he looked down at the business card still in his hand. Marcus Ellison, Supervisory Special Agent, Civil Rights Division, and held it there for a long time, feeling the weight of what the next 48 hours would cost him and deciding quietly that he was willing to pay it. The federal charges against Wade Pruitt were filed within 72 hours. Deprivation of rights under color of law, unlawful detention, illegal search and seizure, willful destruction of federal government property. The union reviewed the dashcam footage, the sally port footage, the evidence room footage, and the crowbar on the concrete floor, and declined in a formal letter that used the language of ethical obligation to provide legal representation or financial support. They cited conduct inconsistent with professional standards, which was the language they used when a member had done something so thoroughly documented that defending him would cost the union more in public legitimacy than in dues. Pruitt was assigned a public defender. The public defender, upon reviewing the same footage, began having conversations about cooperation agreements that Pruitt refused for 4 months on the strength of an arrogance that had not yet fully understood what it was up against. Carson Briggs submitted his resignation letter at 8:47 a.m., the morning after the arrest, before his office had opened, slid under the department director's door, as though submitted in secret. The FBI served a search warrant on his precinct computers at 11:15 a.m. the same morning. What the agents found was not a surprise email, metadata complaint, file, timestamps, and a documented pattern of active suppression spanning 11 years. 23 dismissed complaints, 7 cases flagged for review and closed without it. 3 complainants who had been quietly contacted and discouraged from pursuing formal channels. The architecture of protection laid out in its own records with the orderly self-incrimination of a system that never expected to be examined. Briggs was indicted 3 months later for obstruction of justice and civil rights conspiracy. Sheriff Gerald Hatch was not indicted. He was placed under a binding federal oversight agreement requiring the department to submit all Route 9 traffic stop documentation to an independent federal monitor for 3 years, mandating body cam footage for every stop, prohibiting stops based on vehicle profile characteristics, and requiring all civilian complaints to be processed by an external board. The first time in Mercer County's history that an official document acknowledged the second map existed. Deputy Marcus Webb called the number on the card at 9:15 a.m. He spoke with the division's office for 3 hours. He gave a sworn affidavit, confirming everything: the fog line fabrication, Pruitt's profiling reflex, the pressure to corroborate a false account, his own failure to intervene at the stop. He did not minimize his own role. He gave them everything he had, including the dates of 3 earlier stops he had witnessed and not reported. The affidavit was thorough and honest, and cost him something that would take a long time to name: not his career, but a particular kind of self-image that had been easier to maintain when he was still just watching and had not yet been asked to choose. Marcus Ellison filed a written recommendation with the state certification board that Webb's certification be preserved on the basis of his ultimate refusal to perjure himself and his full voluntary cooperation. The recommendation was accepted. Webb transferred to a neighboring county 8 months later. He requested a community relations assignment. He attended his first community policing meeting 2 weeks after his transfer and helped organize the second one himself, and sat in the circle with residents who had questions about the department and answered as many of them as honestly as he could, which was more than he could have answered a year before, because he knew more, now knew it differently, knew it in his body, about what it costs people when the institution fails them. 8 months after the night on Route 9, the federal district courtroom in which United States versus Wade Pruitt was adjudicated filled to capacity in the way that rooms fill when the proceedings represent something larger than the specific case on the docket. The gallery was not there for spectacle. They were there because Route 9 had been their road, the road they planned alternate routes to avoid the road. They texted family members about when they had to drive it after dark. The road that had carried a specific quality of danger through the county for over a decade as an open secret, the official record refused to confirm. They were there because confirmation was happening today, in public on the permanent record, and they needed to be present when it did. Pruitt sat at the defense table in clothes that no longer fit him quite right. The gray slacks, the off-the-rack dress shirt, the jacket that had bought for a different version of himself. Without the uniform, the duty belt, the badge and gun and tactical boots, he had the deflated appearance of something that had been kept pressurized artificially for a long time and had finally been allowed to exhale. He had lost weight. His skin was pale in the way of a man who has been under institutional lighting for longer than is good for a person. He had turned down the plea deal 4 months in, refused it on the instinct that had served him for 14 years, and was badly miscalibrated for the one that followed, and had watched the trial proceed with the grinding, comprehensive thoroughness of a federal prosecution that had 300 pages of camera-confirmed evidence and a cooperating witness who had been in the car. The federal prosecutor had not been theatrical. She had been methodical. She played the dashcam footage in its entirety. She played the Sallyport footage. She played the evidence room recording. She called Marcus to the stand for 4 hours, and Marcus had testified the way he did everything quietly, precisely, without ornamentation, and the jury had watched him and watched the footage and deliberated for under 4 hours before returning with a verdict on every count. Judge Patricia Wren looked down at Pruitt with the focused, impersonal attention of someone who has been doing this work for 16 years and has nothing left to prove. "Mr. Pruitt," she began, "you were entrusted with a badge and an oath. The oath was not a formality. It had a specific application to protect the constitutional rights of every person on the roads of Mercer County, without exception, without qualification. What this trial has demonstrated is not a single night of poor judgment. It is a 14-year career built on the substitution of personal bias for constitutional law, maintained by an institutional environment that allowed that substitution to continue without correction, without consequence, and without anyone in a position of authority choosing to look directly at it. She paused. 23 people filed complaints. 23 people went through the process and were told by the apparatus that was supposed to protect them that they were wrong. She set her pen down. They were not wrong. They will know today on this record that they were not wrong. She replaced her glasses. For the deprivation of rights under color of law, the unlawful detention, the illegal search and seizure, and the willful destruction of federal government property, I sentence you to 96 months in federal prison, 8 years day for day, without possibility of early release. Your municipal pension is stripped in its entirety. The liquidated value of that pension will be distributed to the Civil Rights Legal Aid Fund serving Mercer County residents. The gavel came down. Pruitt sat very still for a moment, his hands flat on the defense table, his chin lowering slowly toward his chest as the weight of it arrived. Then the federal marshals came for him, and they walked him toward the side door of the courtroom. And as they turned him, he looked back at the gallery one last time. Marcus Ellison was in the second row, charcoal suit well cut, leather portfolio closed on his lap, sitting with the stillness of a man who has been here before, not in this room, but in this moment. The moment when the record corrects itself and the correction is made permanent. Pruitt looked at him. Marcus held his gaze for 2 seconds. His expression was not triumph. It was not pity. It was something simpler and more complete than either the quiet, settled acknowledgement of a debt that has been paid in full. The look of a man who drove a road in the dark at the speed limit with his hands on the wheel and waited and was right to wait. Then Marcus closed his portfolio, stood, and walked out through the main doors without looking back. He had another county to get to. Route 9 through Mercer County is still there. The same pine forest, the same flat fields, the same 2 lanes running south from the airport toward Beaumont, under skies that go enormous and dark after sunset. What changed is what happens on it now. The federal monitoring program requires dashcam data submission for every stop. An external oversight board reviews every complaint. A small coalition of residents, organized through the Legal Aid Fund, seated by Pruitt's stripped pension, erected a plain steel marker near the Harlow Creek overpass. One engraved line, equal protection. This road, this law, all people. Marcus Ellison never saw it. By the time it was installed, he was already in another state, in another rental car, with another Pelican case in the cargo hold, doing what he always did. Deputy Marcus Webb drives past the marker on his way to work now. He slows down every time, reads it, and keeps going. He is almost always running slightly late, because the community meetings his department holds, his suggestion, his agenda run long. People have a lot to say when they finally believe someone is listening. When Marcus told Andre years ago that justice doesn't enforce itself, that someone has to be willing to drive the road in the dark at the speed limit and wait, Andre had laughed, had said his brother made patience sound like a superpower. He wasn't laughing when he saw his brother's name in the coverage of the Mercer County case. He was sitting at his kitchen table in Northern Virginia with his coffee gone cold and a feeling in his chest that had been displaced for 14 years, quietly returning to its place. He picked up his phone. He called his brother. He said, "I saw it." And Marcus said, "I know." And that was the whole conversation, and it was enough. Justice served is worth every share. If this story moved you, hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and pass it on to someone who needs to hear it.